Let's dive into a massive thought experiment. One that, on the surface, sounds like the ultimate dream for our globalized world. What if we could just get rid of one of the oldest, most stubborn barriers to human connection?
I mean, really think about it. You wake up tomorrow and everyone, your neighbor, the person on the news, from halfway across the world, your boss, everyone speaks the same language as you. No more translation apps, no more awkward pointing and gesturing on vacation, just perfect, effortless understanding.
It sounds like a utopia, right? A world where communication is finally seamless. I mean, that has to be a more peaceful, more prosperous, a more perfect world. It just has to be. But as we're about to find out, that gut feeling, well, it might be dangerously, catastrophically wrong.
But okay, before we get into the really dark side of all this, let's just appreciate the immediate, staggering upside. Because from a purely economic point of view, this change would be nothing short of a miracle.
So, the very first thing that happens, the entire language industry just vanishes. Poof. That market for apps, for tutors, for corporate training, it was on track to be worth nearly $600 billion. In this new world, all that money, and maybe more importantly, all the time and brain power of 2 billion people trying to learn another language, it's all instantly freed up for something else.
But that's just the start. The biggest shockwave would hit global trade. A massive meta-analysis looking at over 80 different academic studies found something incredible. When two countries share a language, trade between them jumps by an average of 44%. That would trigger an explosion in global commerce unlike anything we have ever seen.
Economists actually have a name for this. They call it the language tariff. It's this invisible tax, this hidden cost that adds about 7% to the price of, well, everything that has to cross a linguistic border. By getting rid of all these different languages, we've essentially just given the entire planet a massive, permanent tax cut.
And the ripple effects would just keep going, creating a truly frictionless global economy. You'd have a talent tsunami, as skilled workers from anywhere could instantly compete for any job, everywhere. That weird home bias puzzle in finance, where investors mostly stick to what they know, solved. Overnight, capital and talent could finally, perfectly, flow to wherever they're needed most. It's an economist's dream come true. But this dream has a terrifying hidden cost. Because while the global economy is booming like never before, something else, something much darker, is starting to brew under the surface. What if those very same language barriers we just celebrated destroying, what if they were actually a good thing? What if they were holding something absolutely terrible back?
See, it turns out this perfect economic utopia is built on a fatal flaw, a complete misunderstanding of what language differences actually do for human society.
Political scientists have a term for it. They call it the conflict buffer. It turns out that language barriers, with all their messiness and their inefficiency, they act as a sort of crucial, invisible safety mechanism. They slow disputes down, they force anger and disagreement into slower, more boring channels, like bureaucracies and politics, and that actually stops them from immediately exploding into violence.
And look, this isn't just some theory. It is backed up by cold, hard data. A massive study of global conflicts found a shocking inverse correlation. The greater the linguistic difference between two groups, the lower the chance of violent rebellion. Why? Because you fight about language over decades in schools and government buildings. You don't typically fight about it on a battlefield. So what happens when you just rip that buffer away? When you remove the very friction that has, paradoxically, been helping keep the peace all this time? Well, you get a world without any filters.
This whole idea that a common language prevents war, it's a dangerous myth. Just look at history. Some of the most brutal, vicious conflicts ever were fought between people who understood each other perfectly. The Yugoslav wars, they all spoke Serbo-Croatian. The Rwandan genocide, Kinyarwanda. The American Civil War, English. Language was never the real barrier. The deeper divisions, ideology, religion, ethnicity, they were always there, just waiting.
It's funny, the writer Douglas Adams totally called this decades ago. In his books, the Babelfish gave everyone perfect instant translation. And did it lead to peace? No way. It caused more and bloodier wars than anything else in the history of creation. Why? Because for the very first time, everyone knew exactly what horrible, insulting things everyone else was saying about them. It's a joke, but it contains a terrifyingly real piece of insight.
So in our new, single-language world, propaganda becomes frictionless. Hateful ideas, extremist manifestos, calls to violence, they can now spread across the entire globe in an instant.
There's no translation delay. There's no cultural filter to slow them down or maybe dilute their power. Radicalization goes from being a regional problem to a global pandemic overnight.
And this brings us to the final, chilling reality of our little thought experiment. The dream of perfect unity has completely collapsed into a nightmare of perfect, terrible clarity.
So here's the central paradox, right? The promise was a world of frictionless economic efficiency. The reality, the peril, is a world of frictionless, high-definition conflict. We now understand our business partners perfectly, but we also understand our ideological enemies with a new, terrifying, and incredibly dangerous clarity.
And finally, you have to think about the devastating human cost. Every single person on Earth would suffer from what's called cultural bereavement, that sudden traumatic loss of their mother tongue. All the history, the poetry, the identity tied up in it, just gone. And that creates a vacuum, a societal security dilemma. To fill that massive hole in their identity, people would desperately cling to what's left, their religion, their nationality, their ideology, hardening those identities into something far more extreme, far more exclusive.
Which leaves us with one final, very disturbing question. We tore down all the walls of language hoping it would bring us peace, only to discover that they were actually load-bearing walls holding our fragile world together. So, in this new era of perfect, dangerous understanding, what new, more solid walls would we be forced to build just to survive each other?